Hey everyone, Ben Coomer Radio, episode number 111. That's 111. Me and Rachel are not together today. I have a different female guest. For a long time on the show, the female contingent of the Ben Coomer Radio fan base have been saying, Ben, we need more female people. We need more people representing. And do you know what? It's not through a lack of trying. I think as a whole, the fitness industry is fairly male-dominated. And the people that tend to be very outspoken about their thoughts and what they're doing in the industry tend to be men. But not today. I've sourced a fantastic guest. This guest actually came via me via a different person, via a guy called Matt. I've forgotten your second name, so apologies. I met him at the BTN conference over the weekend, but he said, hey, you got to get this girl on the podcast. She's incredible. And today's podcast is going to be very much about psychology, the psychology of change, and looking at how we think and view ourselves. So let me introduce our guest, Kori Propst. Kori, hello.
Ben, hello. I am quite honored to be here. Sounds like you don't have many females on the show very often.
We've had a handful, but not enough. Would you, in your experience, especially with, I don't know where you are in the industry, would you say it's a bit more male-dominated?
You know, I loved what you said about the males in the industry being more outspoken, and I think you're right on about that. I think we do need more female voices, and female voices that have a real background in the behavioral and psychological component of nutrition and fitness and just change in general. So, yeah, no, I'm really honored to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. So straight away, there's a message to all the ladies out there, especially aspiring coaches in the UK, people that want to have more of a outspoken presence. You know, get your voice heard, be confident, go out there, express yourself. Don't be worried about being judged or what people are going to say. There'll always be those people, and don't worry about it. Let's get more female voices out. Anyway, Kori, there's going to be a good chunk of people that have no idea who you are. Give us the rundown. Who's Kori Propst? What does she do?
I am the wellness director for the Diet Doc Permanent Weight Loss Program. We are a nutrition and fitness weight loss consulting company, and we have locations across the United States. We have a few actually in the UK, in Australia. We have one in Singapore. And just to reiterate about the person whose name you couldn't remember. His name is Matt Lomas.
That's it. Yes.
Yes. And he owns the Diet Doc Derbyshire. So we have someone very, very kind of close to you who does superior work with individuals who are looking to get healthier and lose weight in a very sustainable way. And that's really been what the Diet Doc is all about: sustainable, maintainable, real-life weight loss without rigid meal plans that have you feeling deprived and unable to really get this behavior change going within your lifestyle, eating the foods you enjoy, doing the activity that you like and enjoy and that really fits your schedule, and whether you have a family or not, whether you're in a very high power or travel heavy job, it doesn't matter. Our goal is to teach individuals about their bodies using science, a lot of education and communication and support, because we know that's one of the number one things people need for any type of behavior change, but particularly for weight loss. And very individualized programming. So the Diet Doc, that's where I'm from, and those are the things we really focus on.
Interesting. So the Diet Doc, the location that you've got in Derby that's owned by Matt, is it almost like a physical clinic? Is it both a physical clinic and online? How are you set up to coach people, essentially?
The bulk of our work, Ben, is all online, so it's very convenient for most people. I have clients all over the world. Individuals are communicating with us via email, photos. We'll often do Skype sessions with our clients to provide them the support that they need. Matt does not have a physical location at this point, but he does have a website. So people who would like to learn more about his services and programming can go to that. It's www.dietdoc-derbyshire.com. And they can contact him via email, too, to set up a complimentary consultation. But to answer your question, it is designed to be online to facilitate the ability of most people to do this anywhere.
Okay. I'm just interested then, what was the idea behind having sort of different locations around the world if it's all online? The only reason I ask is it sounds like run a very similar company in that we do online coaching, it's body type nutrition, and we do the same. We do coaching all around the world. We have people all over the place, but we don't have these sort of identified physical locations because it is all online. What was your rationale between sort of having these focused locations?
Well, what is great is that, one, we're able to reach more people. We can facilitate more behavior change and more people meeting their goals by having locations all over the place. It's an online program, Ben, but the majority of our licensed owners, and we license our program, so we train individuals how to go through this process with people who are wanting permanent weight loss. The majority of them do have specific storefront locations. So,
okay.
We know that face-to-face interaction is really, really important. And so those individuals who do have that storefront location have the ability for individuals to come in and meet them a little bit more easily than someone who doesn't. But because, we do have a lot of internet capabilities now, like Skype, to allow that to happen. But we do. It's an online-based program, but a lot of our licensed donors, too, do things like personal training and small group fitness. So they have facilities that they can bring people in, meet with them, do workshops and classroom sort of trainings. I know I do a lot of that because that face-to-face interaction is really important, and it helps them, our owners, to build that sense of community also.
Sure. Okay. So let me get a bit more of an insight into you and your kind of journey. What got you into the fitness industry? What got you focused on nutrition and training? I'm assuming there was a bit of a personal path.
Yes, there was. I have always been active. As a little girl, I was doing ballet and I was doing jazz dance, and then I took gymnastics lessons. And in high school, my freshman year is when I really started getting into weight training. I was 14, did not want to take physics class, so I signed up for Intro to Weight Training. And you can imagine what that looked like, me and a bunch of adolescent boys. And, of course, there's Kori trying to lift more than them, and I did. But that's kind of where it all started. I actually went to college to get my bachelor's degree in vocal performance.
Wow.
I wanted to be a singer. At some point, I think after the first year, I was quite disillusioned and thought, there's no way I can make a living doing this. I need to pick something more practical. And changed my major a few times because I loved performing, obviously, and went into broadcast journalism and then changed that. Finally landed on exercise physiology. Was still really into weight training and fitness in college. Did really struggle with I struggled with disordered eating in the first part of my undergrad years. And that I think really spurred me toward learning more about nutrition and physiology and the body, but also the mind, because I went on to get my bachelor's in exercise physiology, but then got my master's in counseling because I wanted to be able to combine the mind-body components of health and nutrition and behavior change in order to help people more comprehensively. So that's kind of how I got started. I have been with the Diet Doc for 6 years. I was doing in-home family therapy prior to that in a community mental health center, and started doing personal training on the side, still really wanting to combine the mental health and the psychology with the physiology. Started my own small company doing nutrition and weight loss consulting, mental health counseling, and personal training, and was doing that in-home in Colorado. And it wasn't until I actually started competing in physique, in the physique world, where I became really, really interested, even more so, in guiding people towards optimal wellness, because what I saw in that venue was a tremendous lack of focus on these psychological components of health. It was purely geared toward get to your best body, and let's not even consider how you're being affected mentally. So I became a part of the Diet Doc after I attended my first, what we call a fantasy camp. We have these VIP-only camps as part of the other division of our company, which focuses on competition prep. And I attended my first one, and I left that camp knowing that I would be changing my career rather quickly. And Dr. Joe Klemczewski, who is the founder of the Diet Doc, hired me and created this position for me. And it was then, once I came on board, and again, it's been about almost 7 years now, I created the mental edge coaching component of the Diet Doc Permanent Weight Loss System. So a lot of individuals will come to me through a goal of wanting to get in shape, of losing weight, and doing it in the healthiest way possible this time, because as we know, most people who lose weight gain it back, 98 to 100% of people within 3 to 5 years. They come to me through that avenue, but then what we find is that a lot of what they're struggling with in terms of disordered eating, emotional eating, binge eating, has some very strong psychological underlying components that we really need to work through in order for them to get moving in the direction of their goals and their dreams and their ideal bodies and minds. So how did I come to where I am now? It was really this kind of open discovery process of wanting to see how I could combine all of my loves.
Nice. So, I mean, this is perfect because we're now, you've directed us straight into the bulk of the show, and this is where I see you've created a bit more of a niche in that, we really need to get on top of the psychology of the individual when we're looking at the kind of diet process, because I think it's an area that the fitness industry, I think, are uneducated on how to tackle this. And, coaches and people that are even trying to make these changes themselves see that there's an issue with their own psychology, but they're not really sure how to unlock it. And we're all sitting here and we know it, and we can see it, and we can see these patterns, but none of us are really able to delve and unlock it. And hopefully we'll sort of start to unravel a little bit of this picture, over the next half an hour of this show. So I was reading a piece of your work recently I think it was called What Is Wrong With Me That I Feel This Way? And you mention a really poignant sentence throughout this piece. It's, we are neurobiologically wired to gravitate towards familiarity, certainty. Sameness is attractive, even desirable. This works because the brain likes to take shortcuts towards what it is comfortable. Our minds take information from the universe and match it to a frame of reference. What does this relate to that I already know? It asks. In this manner, conflict is bypassed, incoherence is avoided, and discomfort and disintegration is circumvented. Relating this to health, performance and change, Kori, how does this relate, I suppose, to people's sort of inability to change, and why is change hard for people?
Love this topic, Ben. And while that quote may have seemed a little bit convoluted and maybe complicated for most people, I'll put it in just a few simple words. We're creatures of habit.
Yep.
And most people get that. I loved what you said in the beginning of the question about these patterns of behavior. And many of them we're conscious of, and we're aware of them. And we recognize that they occur in our lives, but a lot of them we aren't. And it does take, in terms of what you said, it takes a very deliberate, intentional focus on unlocking them and getting to a place where we're really thinking and being in a more critical way to find out whether, and particularly in the emotional realm, to find out what our emotions are, what emotions we have and which ones we're aware of, but then also which emotions are driving us. So we have emotions, but then emotions have us. And I think when you put it in that perspective, the manner in which we behave and the manner in which we feel and the manner in which we think makes a little bit more sense. I mean, everything that we do, everything that we think and the manner in which we think, all of those things have the potential to become a habit. And I don't know that most people go through their days thinking or responding to their environments that intentionally with that in mind. Because when you look at how busy we are, when you look at how many things we have on our to-do lists, when you look at the number of goals that people have that they're working toward, we really have become like human doings instead of human beings. We're not taking the time to get in touch with who we are, what drives us, what our guiding values and principles are, and if we're even acting and thinking in a way that's congruent with them. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. And I think,
so,
you know,
yeah,
what we're now getting at already is that when people sort of struggle with change, I would argue that they don't often know why they're really wanting to change.
I totally agree with you. I think one of the major barriers in changing for good is that there isn't enough thought that goes into what is driving me to set this goal. Is this goal mine, or is this something that someone else said that I need to or should be doing? Is this goal tied to what really at my core fulfills me, or is it something that someone important to me, like I said, is demanding that I take into consideration? Is it a part of the organization that I work with who has said this is definitely something you need to be integrating into your behavior? But one of the major drawbacks is that not enough time is taken to really conceptualize what this goal is going to involve. It's fine to have an intention. It's fine to be able to say, I want to lose weight. But then what are all those other thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are going to need to be in place in order to lose weight successfully? So we also have to consider, too, the environmental and external cues that we may be guided by unknowingly. You know, I just read that, and I just wrote an article on this about, you know, when you have big box stores there like Costco or Sam's, and you can buy just huge amounts of things all in one shot. 70%, sure. They always offer free samples, right? People love free food. Whether they're losing weight, dieting, or not, people love to know that they can go get free food. 70% of people who are offered free samples will partake of them. 40% of that 70% will actually purchase the food that's being offered, regardless of whether they want to purchase it or not. They'll buy it. And so it's situations, events, environments like that where we're not really considering how we're impacted by them. And that goes right back to we're not thinking through enough how to prepare for a goal. It's okay. I feel like I want to lose weight. Well, I'm going to write down the goal, lose weight. That's not enough. And everyone is in a different stage of readiness for change. So, and this relates to motivation. I may be motivated to lose weight, but I may not be necessarily ready to take action on losing weight. I may have thought, this is really something I need to do. My doctor is telling me that I need to do it for health reasons. But I, again, may not have thought about how I'm going to be impacted by this goal, how my family's going to be impacted by this goal, how I'm going to have to change my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and environment to meet this goal successfully. And so people can fail pretty easily without that amount of preparation that is necessary. And when we look at what people's basic psychological needs are, and this really speaks volumes to the ability to pursue a goal persistently and consistently. You've got connection, you've got autonomy, and you've got competence. And everyone has these. Everyone has these three basic psychological needs that govern someone's self-determination. Their ability to integrate this goal into the core of who they are. Connection really means that I not just fit in, not I have to change myself in order to be accepted and loved by people in my circle. It's a sense of relatedness in that I belong. Regardless of who I am and what I do, I belong and I feel that. The autonomy component is huge because when you think about how, and I've been in situations where I've set a goal and it wasn't my goal. I set a goal and realized halfway through that this was something someone said I should do. It's not something I was even interested in doing. And I was having a hard time really staying engaged. Wasn't fun. Not that every goal through the action process is going to be fun, but I couldn't find the deep down reasons for doing it. And autonomy is this sense of this is my choice. I chose this. And these are the reasons why, and I can come up with them. And they're really related to who I am and what's important to me and what my character strengths are. But that's one of the other basic psychological needs. And then there's competence. Am I, or do I have a felt sense that I can use my abilities, have the opportunities to use my abilities and skills and competencies as part of the attainment of this goal? So when we see people who, say, for example, are working on losing weight and they fall into like binge eating or emotional eating type of behavior, that sort of behavior is what's called a substitute or compensatory behavior. They may have a situation in their environment. Say it's a woman who's losing weight and she gets in a fight with her partner and she goes straight to the kitchen and just starts eating the bag of chips or diving into the peanut butter, right? Her autonomy or her sense of competence, or probably more accurately, her sense of connection in that moment was threatened. She feels this sort of break or fissure in her relationship, and she doesn't necessarily know how to handle that emotionally. And so she's using food as a compensatory behavior to try to fulfill that crack and to regain a sense of connection. But the food isn't going to provide that for her. So, and we see this all the time. We see it with individuals who are trying to quit smoking or quit drinking. Of course, there's a physiological component that goes along with it. But if we're looking purely at the psychological side of things, we really have to learn how to look at and take into consideration these three basic psychological needs. Again, they're connection, autonomy, and competence. So I know that was a very long answer to your question, but there's so many factors that go into this.
Oh, there is. And, people will ask for the solution, and we're going to try and get to a bit of a solution as much as we can on this show. But, context is always key in any environment. Now, one thing I'm really interested in, because you work with a lot of clients online, is that, most people's goals are quite superficial in that they'll say, I want to lose weight, I want to build muscle. It's a very kind of easy goal in their eyes, but they don't have any root connection as to why they want that goal. And obviously, because they don't have any root connection, it's easy for them to fail because there's no kind of emotional connection or drive. Now, when you work with someone via the internet and you don't have that kind of connection with them, how do you get an individual to explore the rationale behind their goals and why they really want to reach that goal, and to kind of open that out so that they're driven emotionally towards fulfilling that goal?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would argue that we do an incredible job of establishing that sense of emotional connection with our clients, Ben. Despite it being online, there's so much that can be done just through virtual communication. I mean, we're having almost daily communication with our clients, whether it's by phone, Skype, and it's usually by email. But I will say that from the very first interaction that we have, and that's part of our intake process, is we're asking them some very specific questions regarding their level of motivation to change, what they've tried in the past, what they recognize have been their barriers in the past, what they see as their particular strengths. We do a lot of what's called motivational interviewing to really get a sense for, like you said, their emotional and psychological sense of themselves in terms of what they've delineated as their goal. If I have someone who comes to me, and we all know that we all want to look good. We do. We want to be accepted by people. People, they're going to come to me for weight loss because they want to lose weight. They want to look good. They want to fit in their clothes. They want to feel sexy. Okay, that's super and that's awesome, and I'm going to support them in that. And we need to, like you said, be looking at what is going to keep them going. What is going to keep them feeling like there's this sense of fulfillment? What's going to keep them curious about the process? What's going to put them in this mindset of discovery and get them out of automatically moving to this sense of loss or confusion or doubt or wanting to run away from discomfort when it gets hard? And that's it right there, is to move them from this extrinsic, externally oriented, I want muscle and I want to be toned, into being very explicit with them and asking them those tough questions. That's fantastic. I love that goal. But what's going to keep you going? What's going to keep you motivated? What's going to keep you committed? And I just want to comment real briefly on this issue of motivation and versus commitment. I think a lot of people have kind of a misconception about it. And when we're looking at these extrinsic or image-oriented sort of goals versus I do this because I want to be able to sit in an airline seat and travel with my wife when I retire. You can see the difference, extrinsic versus intrinsic. It's those intrinsic, value-driven, this is weaved into the fabric of who I am goals that are going to lead to the most integrated sort of goal pursuit and that are going to keep the person committed. Motivation waxes, it wanes, it changes with mood, it changes with what you said, the context, the environment I'm in, the people I'm with, the sort of challenges that I'm dealing with, the amount of stressors in my life. And we have to get away from believing that we have to always want to do something in order to do it. If all I did were the things I wanted to do, I would eat, I would sleep, and I would train. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of my work I really, really love and I want to do it, but you get my point.
Yeah.
I don't want to study for and write my dissertation every night. I don't. I would avoid it if I waited to feel like I wanted to. And yet I do it anyway. Why? Because I've identified, just like you said, the why. Why am I doing it? What is this going to lead to for me? What are those ultimate outcomes that I'm excited about and striving for? And this brings us into this, kind of process versus content struggle that I think a lot of people face, which is, when do I focus on the ultimate outcome and when do I try to be and really focus on staying present in the here and now and looking at what I'm doing that's right in front of me. And for behavior change, this is super, super important. It's good that I want to lose 50 pounds. That's fantastic. But I've got all these other very important key steps that need to be taken in the meantime, like just this meal right now and just this bite, for example. We rush through meals, and when we're eating in a hurry, we eat more than we need to. It's less than mindful, and then we get hungrier faster. And so my point to that is there are very specific things we need to be focusing on right here, right now. Like if I'm eating this bite, I shouldn't be focusing on the next one, right? Or if I'm eating this meal, I shouldn't be thinking about what I'm going to have for the next one. Ideally, these are the sorts of things we can teach people how to do better in order to feel more satisfied with the process of weight loss and the journey, as opposed to, I just need to lose weight.
That's awesome. And the thing is, every time you answer one of my questions, you go off in sort of so many different avenues. I wonder where to continue the conversation, because I'm thinking well, let me go off on that train of thought. No, let me go off on that train of thought. And I'm kind of sat here sort of partially paralysed often by your answers. But I think, aside from the coaching aspect of a coach being able to help an individual, I think what I've got out of this already from if I was a consumer or a normal person looking to change their lifestyle, because I know that there'll be people listening to this podcast, even 111 episodes in, that still haven't made the changes that they want to make. And really, those individuals need to start getting more intrinsic about their goals and really digging deep and identifying why they're doing it, rather than just, well, Ben keeps saying it and I know I'm a bit overweight and I should lose weight and I know I should eat broccoli instead of cereal and, etc.
Right. Well, and one of the best ways I think that they can begin to assess what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're going to be affected and how people around them are going to be affected is to engage in a very deliberate process of assessing the say it's weight loss, because majority of people need to lose weight. What are the advantages of losing weight and what are the disadvantages of losing weight? Most people don't consider the disadvantages of losing weight.
Yeah, great point.
Of the process of losing weight. But not just the advantages and disadvantages of losing weight, the advantages of not losing weight. That's another very important question. So this can really kind of help people to discern whether they're actually ready. And if they're not ready for actual weight loss, then what can they do? And as coaches, I mean, we're in an awesome place to be able to help people wherever they are. If they're not actually ready to start losing weight, then we can be educating them about what weight loss is, about how the body changes as a result of weight loss, or just about health, wellness, fitness in general, and taking small steps towards getting them ready to lose weight. So that's what I would recommend initially for consumers, is to really engage in a deliberate questioning process. Because asking why sometimes just becomes really difficult and convoluted. I mean, I think of when a little kid spills their milk and the parent's like, why'd you do that? How the heck do you answer that question? Because I was being irresponsible. You know what I mean, Ben?
Yeah.
So we have to have specific methods and powerful questions that we're asking ourselves to really get down to the nitty-gritty.
So for a lot of people, it comes down to very much being honest with themselves as well, because sometimes the depth that someone needs to go to ask themselves about their reason for change needs them to delve to a place that's potentially slightly dark and they feel uncomfortable encountering.
I love how you said that. I really do. Because we engage in a lot of defensiveness and protective sort of behaviors to save face, not just in front of other people, but for ourselves as well. There are things we don't like to or want to admit to ourselves. And for someone who wants to change their behavior for good, that's really part of it, is in being able to ask the tough questions, become very honest, become very authentic, become very vulnerable in being real and genuine about, I don't like to say the demons that they face, but just the difficulties that they've had and what may be kind of deeply hidden in the background that's guiding their behavior, or even not hidden at all, but that, like you said, they don't want to admit. What I find so often, Ben, in my work is that someone comes to me for emotional eating, right? They're struggling with binging. And of course, their primary issue is I have emotional eating problems, or I'm a food addict, and I can't control myself. What we get into and what we find is that most often, the majority of the time, it has nothing to do with food. Nothing to do with food. Of course, they may have been on 10 to 15 different diets, and so they learned how to be very rigid and restrained and inflexible, and so they have all these rules that they're subscribing to. But underneath it, there's something that's going on relationally. There's a lot of shame. There's distorted thinking patterns, a lot of assumptions being made, very black and white thinking, the inability to be with their emotions. And so what we teach them how to do is to avoid avoidance.
Nice.
We're teaching them how to be emotionally intelligent. You know, what a lot of people don't understand is that, we'll take binge eating, for example. It's a way of stuffing down emotion to avoid discomfort. So, right, if I'm binging, I'm not focused on how terrible I feel. I'm focused on stuffing down that emotion, getting it away, and food is going to do that, albeit temporarily, because when I'm done, guess what's on the other side? That same emotion plus a bunch of guilt for what I just engaged in, versus, say, someone who is struggling with anorexia or not eating. No, we're no longer stuffing ourselves with food to avoid an emotion. We're not eating, and now all we think about is food, so we're still avoiding the emotion. So it really is about getting to a level of vulnerability and teaching them how to be with their emotion and feeling, not necessarily to identify with it and sit in it and stew in it, but to be able to say, this is here, and I'm not comfortable with this, but to be okay with that discomfort, and to know that they're having these emotions because they're human, and it's okay to not be okay. And this leads into a whole nother discussion about, you know, what I recognize so many people believe is in that they need to be happy all the time. And you know what? That's just not life.
No,
it's not life. Life is a roller coaster of ups, of downs, and some of us are more emotionally sensitive than others, so the ups can feel super up and the downs can feel pretty intense. But it's learning to be with who we are and learning how to be accepting of who we are, so that we can exhibit and demonstrate towards ourselves and others a bit more compassion.
let me attack binging from another angle, and I've literally just sort of thought of this angle really. In a lot of people's environments where they feel out of power and out of touch with their environment, their friends, you know, their love for themselves, would you say binge eating gives people power in the fact that they have a certain amount of control over what they're doing? Like, it's something that they can almost control because nothing else seems in control?
I think if you asked anyone who could be honest about their binge eating behavior, they would tell you that they feel out of control when they're doing it.
Okay.
But when you look at it from the perspective of they feel out of control in terms of being able to handle their emotions well, yes, they will move towards food as a substitute control measure.
Okay.
But it's an ineffective sense of control.
Sure.
So again, the goal would be to help them to understand what is leading them there in the first place. And a lot of the work I do is on helping individuals to recognize what their emotions are first. It's really amazing to me how many people can't identify in a word what the emotions they most commonly feel are. They can say, I'm uncomfortable. They may be able to say, I'm bored, or I'm anxious, or I worry a lot. But they don't have a sense either of where they're feeling, where those emotions come from in their bodies. When I ask, tell me how you know you're anxious, it's very rare that I'll get an answer immediately. I don't know. I've never thought about it that way. Because emotions resonate in our bodies. Our bodies tell us what we're experiencing emotionally. But we're so used to operating from the neck up and being very cerebral that we really need to learn how to monitor and be in touch with what's going on below the neck. Because where does anxiety reside for a lot of people? They feel a tightness in the chest. They feel butterflies in their stomach. They notice that their shoulders are up around their ears. They notice that they're barely breathing. It's these sorts of signs and symptoms that individuals who struggle with binge or emotional eating need to learn how to get in touch with so that they can recognize they're headed in that sort of direction and into a pattern of ineffective behavior. Step one, that's step one, a mind-body connection and recognition so that they're no longer propelled toward running away from discomfort. And it can become about redefining, too, what discomfort is. In a situation where a person who's losing weight, say they're at a party and everyone's eating and everyone's drinking and there's tons of decadent food everywhere and they're starting to feel uncomfortable, to be able to say, okay, I'm uncomfortable right now. I don't need to run from this. What can I learn? If I were going to approach this in a curious way, in a sort of discovery sort of a way, what would I do? If I were going to look at this objectively and not get sucked into this emotion or the thought of, I can't handle this, because then that thought is going to guide some probably pretty negative behaviors if I believe it. If I were going to look at this curiously, what could I do differently? And that's another point, Ben, is that a lot of people believe their thoughts. And our thoughts lie. Our thoughts are assumptive. They're black and white. They often are not based in reality. And so to be able to say, okay, you know what? I know that's my pattern, to think I can't do this. Doesn't mean I have to believe it.
Because the thoughts that we have, because I want to try and help people out with some of the information that we've delivered today. People, when they think about their brain and how it thinks, people think it is just a case of, oh, well, I should be able to think differently. When people and coaches talk about changing your mindset, they make it sound like it's simply a case of, instead of thinking this way, I'm going to think that way. And in a small way it is, but in the big context, in the grand scheme of things, how you think mentally and how you create an action with your mind is a habit-based approach, just like anything else. Like if we were going to go into the gym and squat, the first time we do it, we might suck at it. And we need to do it again and again and again, and we need to create a habit so that it becomes a pattern and it becomes ingrained. And surely the changes that we need to see in our own mental state is, again, a simple case sometimes of just applying a different mindset and trying to do it. When, like you're saying, you identify the thought process that you're going through, it might be negative, and instead of, yes, you're going to try and make that positive, but it's going to revert back to being negative. But the more and more you try and change it to be positive, at some point there's got to be a tipping point, and whatever action or life event makes that tipping point happen, we don't know, but surely it's still an art of practice.
It's definitely an art of practice, deliberate, intentional practice. And, you know, as you were talking, I had this image of inside of our brains, and when we practice and we do something over and over and over again, and our different neurons are connecting, we're creating these new, faster pathways, and those neural pathways are becoming myelinated. Myelination is myelin is a fatty substance around the neurons that increases the speed at which the neuronal firings are activated and move. And you see among people who, I mean, take a high-level athlete, a golfer, for example, who does the same movements repeatedly, those neuronal pathways that fire over and over and over and over again are the most highly myelinated. The myelination is thicker. So when we think of it from that perspective, yes, when we can look at it from a more biological perspective, it can take the emotion out of it, and then we're almost in a more somewhat removed sense where we can say, okay, if I were going to just look at this from what needs to be done right now, I just need to practice. Yes, absolutely. How did we learn to tie our shoes? We did it over and over and over and over again, and it became automatic. How did we learn to tell time, count money, all of those things? They became automatic because we practiced. But I think from the psychological side, we need individuals in our lives who can support us. And that support needs to be autonomous sort of support, not demanding or critical. And that's where I see a lot of the women that I work with struggle in that they don't have individuals in their lives who are providing the type of support that they need. And as coaches, it's very, very important for us to understand what type of support our clients thrive with. And to be able to ask them that, how do you prefer that I support you and praise you? And are we praising our clients, and are our clients looking at their strengths in a way that is rewarding not intelligence, but effort? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I thought you were going to carry on there.
Oh, I apologize.
I've been really used to you sort of stringing together sort of epic ramblings, but it's, we've covered so much, and I think what I want to get for the people listening out of this is probably two key points that I've extracted from just, listening to the things that you've said, and that, we need to be very honest with ourselves and identify a why, a reason, and a very introspective look at the goals that we have and why we want to achieve them. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is the practice of how we see these situations that we're in that potentially lead us to a negative outcome. And, like you've mentioned, have this kind of positive environment and put yourself in a positive environment so that the more and more that you practice these changes and these mental sort of hacks to try and get around what might seem negative, the more and more you practice it, at some point it's going to click, and then you'll get yourself into a bit more of what I call a positive flow state. And then after that click, things tend to become a lot easier, because all the things that you've been trying to do essentially fall into place.
They do. That's very well said. The other big point, I think, would be to learn how to involve the body in everything you're doing mentally. We call it a mental game, but those individuals who learn how to access their most relevant emotional spark are using their bodies and their physiology to get to that mental place. And a lot of it comes from their ability to deliberately focus on their breathing, because that creates that less stressful physiological place where people are able to use their mental faculties more effectively. I mean, we can say to ourselves, don't think that, don't think that, don't think that. And what are we going to think? We're going to think the very thing that we said we didn't want to think, because now what we don't want to think is front and center in our minds. So we can look at it two ways. We can look at it from a place of acceptance that what I'm thinking right now doesn't have to guide my behavior at all. It's just a thought. It's a string of words. That's it. I can look at that string of thought like clouds floating across the sky. Or I can engage those thoughts more and say, okay, is that even relevant? Is that realistic? Is that even true? Is there evidence for that thought? No, there isn't. What is the truth in this situation? Engage in more kind of inquisitiveness about it. So there are different approaches. Yes, practice is primary, but there are different ways to practice as well.
Nice. Well, we've covered a huge amount today, Kori. Thank you so much for being on the show. I think, and I hope, that people have got a huge amount out of this, and more than anything, it's going to stimulate their own thought process. It's going to stimulate a few tools where they can sit down and look at what they're doing critically, and, you know, the coaches among us that are listening to this, you know, maybe bring in some different thought processes of how you're going to tackle clients that you might coach and approaches that you might take. Kori, I'd like people to be able to find more of your work if they have the desire to. Where's the best place to go to find a bit more of Kori Propst?
Well, I appreciate that, Ben. We just released our book. Dr. Joe Klimczewski and I co-authored a book called 50 Days to Your Best Life. And this book really combines the physiology of weight loss with the mental psychological component. But that can be found on our website, www.thedietdoc.com. I can be contacted via that website, or my email is Kori, spelled Kori, at thedietdoc.com. And just want to say that I really appreciate you having me on, Ben, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun, and more than anything, I genuinely hope people get some good stuff out of this, because psychology isn't discussed enough in the fitness industry. We're always talking about diets and training and abs and, you know, the latest rep range, but the power of the mind is literally the one thing that intertwines everything. And until someone masters their own mind, masters their own goals, masters the perception that they see themselves in and the way that they move forward in life, I don't think they'll ever truly get a grasp of what they're trying to achieve with it all.
I agree with you.
So, again, Kori, thank you ever so much for being on the show. Everyone, myself and Rachel Guy will be back on the show next week with another Q&A filled podcast. I mentioned on last week's show, episode 110, that I was going to be releasing a big video that I want your help with. That video should be live in around a week to 2 weeks' time. And I know I didn't have a title for you to look out for. I now have a title for you. The title of the video is Diet, the disease of our generation. So I asked a big favour of you all. When this video goes live, if you could do me the honour of sharing it, put it in front of an influential character, because I think this, and you make your own judgment of this when you see this video. I think this video has the power to make a lot of people think about the changes that they want to make and the reasons why they might be in the place that they're still in. If you've got a question for the podcast for me and Rachel to answer, then please email bencoomer@gmail.com with the subject line podcast. If you've enjoyed this show, please give me a shout on Facebook, hit like, click share, hit retweet on Twitter, and share the love for this show. Kori, thanks again.
Ben, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for listening to the show, and I will see you next week. Ciao. Good morning, Grunsborough. Not quite as glamorous as Vietnam. I've been to Vietnam, amazing place. Little homage to Robin Williams there, who's sadly not with us now. Rachel's obviously with me on the show today.